We flew in a bunch of vaguely naive kids from Wellington straight into Johannesburg, and we rented an Avis van and we stuck a big M in front of the Avis and called it Mavis. We drove into central Joburg, set ourselves up in an apartment, and then Alison Webber and Ian went about setting up the various bits of content. We travelled all over South Africa. We flew and we drove. Ali Webber had met up with Stephen Biko some months before he was murdered. We tried to get to Robben Island to see Mandela. That didn't work. And everywhere we went, we would get phone calls in our hotel rooms by mysterious men asking us if our project was going okay. And so it became very obvious we were being spied on by the system. And so we felt intimidated, which was probably the plan. And but we had a very good time, and the documentary that came out of it is actually a very good record of the situation in South Africa at that time. John Walker was shot on film. It was a pretty sort of average sort of documentary until we latched on to this Photosonics Action Master camera, which shot at 300 or 350, 600 frames a second. And we filmed John Walker running. And as his feet hit the ground, you could notice there was a shock in his heel, which was very disturbing to everyone who watched it because it stood a fair chance of ultimately wrecking him as a runner. And so technically that was one of the great things, was we borrowed this camera from the National Film Unit, shot Walker running, and lo and behold, it's the shock through the heel and the ankle was evident at this frame speed. The Governor was huge. There were 3 episodes to be shot by the National Film Unit and 3 episodes shot by television, TV, whatever we were called, NZBC. We shot episodes 3, 4 and 5 at the same time. They were shooting 1, 2 and 3. They weren't all shot sequentially, and this had a lot to do with actor availability and various things. And so the actors would be leapfrogging around the place. Everyone was really into it. It was extraordinary, extraordinary spirit. Everyone worked hell of a hard, and I don't remember, we worked really long days, and we got bad weather and a few things went wrong. But I tend into my career generally only to remember the good parts of it. I don't really remember, you know, the shitty bits. And we went off to Aitutaki to make this film, and that was great. It was fantastic. We flew over, we didn't fly, we shipped a DC-3 over to become our wind machine for the special effects in the storm sequence. And they had a bit of an issue trying to cast the right people in the roles. The film had a completely black cast. They were all Polynesians. But something went wrong in that they couldn't find the star woman, and so they cast Pat Everson in the role of a Polynesian woman. You should watch the film. But it had, you know, it was a good movie, and there was a lot of good people in it. A lot of short films are quite harrowing, hard work and little reward. But it was obvious when talking to Rick and talking to Christine that we could actually make something really pretty special about this by removing the reality of the location and by making the place more abstract. And basically we put up a big blue screen and some bits of art department, and we shot at the Nine Eye Pool. And we lit it adventurously, and we shot it in with an abstract background. Christine came in incredibly well prepared. She'd shot still photos in the pool of every shot she wanted to shoot. And it all went like clockwork. I pretty much stole a look from Stewie Dryborough. I mean, he and I have maybe not stolen things off each other, but we basically, but he shot Once We're Warriors, very heavily filtered. And it had a really brown look to it. So I thought the brown look was pretty good. And so I went hunting for brown filters and found this thing called an antique suede. And then I realized that if I put my camera on the shoulder and basically the whole thing was handheld and just shot what happened, don't try and cinema up things too much, don't try and put cinema all over it, just have a scene and shoot it. And the idea basically being that if we were filming a scene around a dinner table, I would put the camera on my shoulder and I would become one of the diners at the table. And as a rule of thumb, we've tried to carry that on through a lot of the films we've worked on, and I think it's a pretty valid idea. The look, Maria Jerkovic, the production designer, and I worked on a colour palette. I had said that I didn't want any of the wall colours to be brighter than a flesh tone. My theory being that you can always put more light on things, but it's very hard to take light away. And so if you had light-coloured walls in a moody environment, you couldn't bury the walls because the walls would pick up light on their own. And so Maria did this beautifully rendered these textured walls. All the sets were built in Shepperton Studios, and it was a great privilege to work with all these wonderful British technicians and British art department and costume designers, and they were very, very, very good production to be on. The film ultimately wasn't so successful because it's about a woman who commits suicide, and that was the end of the film. Maybe there was another way of structuring things, but it is a good film, very good film. Well, my biggest break, my biggest ever career break, I'd been shooting commercials in the US for a very significant director called James Gartner. And Gartner had he was able to make people cry in 60 seconds. That's basically his mantra. And so he got an opportunity from Jerry Bruckheimer to make a movie on a Glory Road, which was a story about a university team, basketball team, who hired black players, the first black players ever to play in basketball. Great script. James Gartner was making a worthy film about race relationships. Jerry Bruckheimer wanted a film that was about that, but it wanted to be funny and lighthearted as well. And so there was a little bit of a struggle went on. But it was a huge production. I never had so much money to spend and so bigger toys to play with. We had 5 cameras and 50 or 60 grips and 50 guys on lighting. And so to be able to work with those things was fantastic. But then the worst thing is I had kidney failure right about the middle of the movie, and I had to leave it and come home. So while on the one hand it was the biggest career opportunity I had, my health crapped out and I sort of blew it. Never got back into that same saddle again. But the film, the guy that they brought on to replace me had shot Top Gun, and he was a very heavy hitter and cost twice as much as I did. So I'm very pleased that it cost a lot of money to replace me. It was hell of a hard work. All the crew were accommodated on boats. We were told initially that we could have no women on the crew. It had to be a men all thing. Well, that melted away, luckily. We were also told we weren't allowed to drink a beer at all, but we sorted that out as well. But it was a great personal experience. And the crew were a hand-picked group of people. I didn't want guys who had big flash CVs necessarily. I wanted people who were personally right for the job. And I worked hard to get my team to be the right people. And I have no regrets at all. Everyone worked incredibly well together. It was a good show. One of the greatest lessons I learned really early on is when you come from New Zealand and you go to the UK, there are people there who are going to severely embarrass you by how little you know, but they are the only people who can really help you. If you hire people to work for you who are your equal, you'll never learn anything. And so you must hire the biggest, nastiest experts in their field, because then you'll learn. They might embarrass you, they probably will, but you'll learn from them. And that's the greatest thing that I gained from travelling overseas.